Hey guys, first regardsman here. I'll be talking about Total War and more importantly, Total War Warhammer 40k. Now, I know we talk about Space Marine 2 a lot on this channel, but I'm also a huge fan of the Total War franchise. I have been playing it for the better part of 15 years with a ton of time sunk into both the historical games and the Total War Warhammer fantasy games. So I want to talk about this a bit today because this game got announced back in December of last year at the Game Awards show, and since then, Total War Warhammer 40k has been mostly radio silent. But about a day ago, Creative Assembly actually put out a community blog here talking about their upcoming show and tell show, which is a bit of a new thing for them. So I'll be going over that here a bit today. So first up, they say, "Hello, Total Warriors. You've maybe heard me mention that we're working on a new stream for the end of this month. As it's the first of its kind, I wanted to give some context about what we'll be showing. On April 30th at 3 p.m. BST, we will be going live on Twitch, YouTube, and Bilibili with our first ever Total War show and tell. Now, if you're unaware what Bilibili is just Chinese YouTube, and obviously Twitch and YouTube is the predominant platform where most people will be watching this. Now, next they say, show and tells are something we regularly do internally, where different development teams come together to share snippets of the cool things they're working on, and want to try and extend an invitation to one of these publicly. So down here, we are going to be getting a ton of information for the upcoming Medieval 3, Rome 2 that came out way back in like 2013, and of course Warhammer 3 that is coming out with its new Lords of the End Time DLC this summer, and most importantly for me, and I imagine most people watching, Warhammer 40k Total War. Now here they say there's been a lot of discussion about the game's scale, so we want to take this opportunity to answer some of those questions. We'll show you the current development pass on the planetary visuals, chatting about how we're tackling battling across an entire planet. Then we've got a few battle maps to fly around in, where we'll give you a proper look at the map featured in our trailer, alongside a look at some less dense maps. Now, the biggest thing here for me is the game's scale. This will be the first Total War that's going to be released on consoles alongside PC. And this game being announced on console has caused a lot of the Total War player base to be a bit worried we might get dumbed down campaign AI or mechanics in the game. And I also worry about this as well, but I will say my expectations aren't horrifically low for this, mainly because Creative Assembly has shown they can make a very entertaining RTS on consoles with Halo Wars 2 9 years ago, and hopefully they learned some lessons since then they can implement in this one. But as far as what you should expect from the reveal show for Total War Warhammer 40k, I think we're going to mostly see things like planetary battles, and for the most part, I think Total War Warhammer 40k will be mostly planetary battles in the first place. I know a lot of people want things like naval combat in this game, but I would definitely temper my expectations. If you were looking for something like Battlefleet Gothic Armada in a Total War game, you are almost certainly not going to be getting that in this one. Maybe later down the road, but just keep in mind that this is the first game in a trilogy. If you look back at Total War Warhammer 1 for fantasy compared to where it's at now with all the DLCs, it was a pretty bare bones game. And I mean, even compared to other games at the time, like Total War Attila and even Rome 2, it was pretty bare bones in terms of like on-campaign mechanics and faction mechanics especially, and most of the uniqueness came from the actual like new fantasy units and stuff like that. And though I imagine Warhammer 40k will be in a significantly better spot than Total War Warhammer 1 was on its launch, probably feel a little content dry for players that are moving in directly from Warhammer 3 with Lord of the End Times DLC. But that being said, there will probably still be some space stuff here. You know, there are some ways they can implement this without direct naval combat. That could be stuff like boarding actions on a Space Hulk, or things like a Blackstone Fortress eventually with Necrons, where you have these massive space structures that can basically function as just like on maps for entire armies, which is a pretty cool thing you can do in Warhammer 40k. And as far as what I expect from the reveal show here, it's going to be mostly like planetary maps. I know they say they're going to have a few battle maps to fly around in. Maybe we will see a battle map regarding something around the Space Hulks like I mentioned here, because they have mentioned there will be some space stuff, like there will be space interactions beyond just going from like planet to planet. That's a pretty cool thing, but I would definitely not expect anything regarding like a major naval combat in this one especially. Now, as far as some other things regarding what's coming up for Warhammer 3, they did say they have a discussion of a few bits about the upcoming campaign AI changes. Campaign AI has been a pretty controversial issue in Total War Warhammer Fantasy recently, and they're also finally doing the Siege rework again, basically, because, you know, Warhammer 3 is supposed to have this for ages, and I imagine the naval combat in Warhammer 40k is going to be like the Siege rework of that game. But regardless of content, Total War Warhammer 40k is probably going to be the biggest Total War game ever, and most likely the biggest 40k game ever. I mean, this game has 1 million wish list on Steam, and that is not including the console players that will undoubtedly be coming in as well. And you know, when you look at those numbers, this game is probably going to blow every single other Total War game out of the water. 40k fans are diehard, and even though Creative Assembly has kind of burned a lot of goodwill with the Total War player base, the new players that are coming in from this, they don't have that backlog of comparison from like Total War Warhammer Fantasy, or even things like Rome 2, Attila, Three Kingdoms, and stuff like that. So they will not be sitting there and thinking like, oh my god, this game sucks so much compared to the game I was playing before. This will be their first experience. You saw that a lot with Warhammer Fantasy as well. I think those players are going to love this game. And even if this game like fucking sucks at launch, guys, I'm gonna be honest, it's still gonna bang in terms of like popularity, because Warhammer 40k is just that strong of an IP, and we already saw what Total War Warhammer Fantasy did for the old world setting, which at the point that this game came out, old world was already dead in like the initial launch of Warhammer Fantasy, and Warhammer 40k right now is already more popular than it has ever been, and this is going to be what is likely the most popular 40k game ever. So I am very excited to see what this game does for Warhammer 40k as a franchise alongside Total War. I mean, you saw what Space Marine 2 did for Warhammer 40k, and this game will undoubtedly be far more popular than that game was at launch. So let me know what you guys think about this one. What do you want to see at the reveal show? What are your expectations and worries for this game? And let me know if this will be your first Total War game. I know a lot of you guys are just huge Warhammer 40k fans or Space Marine 2 fans that watch this channel, so I'm curious if this will be your first introduction into the Total War franchise. And if you want to catch me live to watch this reveal show with me on April 30th, I will be available here on YouTube and on Twitch. So if that interests you, you can find that here as well. I will also be covering this game more and more as we approach the official launch, especially once we get an official release date. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.